Who are you?
Die.
Oh, God. Die.
Hi, we're investigators here to investigate the incident.
Oh my God, thank God you're here. Somebody came by earlier. Let me just get the expert, okay?
Alright, sounds good.
Well, what we have here is an exotic case of giant ant. This is part of the sample that I've collected. It's part human blood and part ant blood.
Alright, we'll take this back to the lab.
Thank you.
Hi, we're the investigators.
Hi.
We sent you an ant sample recently.
Right, yes, we have the data for that, and as well we found some strong evidence that we believe you should see. We made a presentation for you, if you'd please take a seat. So here we've determined that there are varying degrees of chronic environmental stress, and then we wanted to determine how that affects ant heterogeneity. And so examining various populations of ants, we found that different biomes and different habitats within each one will have various amounts of stress that is impacting all the species there. And so ants, in particular, will form various types of species which may not be noticeable until something extreme happens, of course. And so the question here is, where did the giant ant originate? To answer that question, we have developed a few scientific facts which we think will help combat this current situation we're having with this epidemic. And what we've seen over time is that although there are several biomes on the Earth, there's one that we're currently recognizing called urban biomes, which of course is man-made. Unlike the natural biomes, which we determine by various temperatures and precipitation and moisture levels, urban biomes are ones that are, of course, all man-made structures, and they take over any given biome and change the environment entirely by taking out the natural items and species that were there initially and replacing them with man-made structures. And as this map shows, urban biomes typically have fragmented pieces of other habitats within them. And so in an area like this, you'll see that you have varying stress levels in the urban parts and in the parks and such, which are a different type of habitat. Typically, the man-made structures in those biomes of urban development have higher stress than the forested areas. And so in order to determine how this affects species such as ants, we collected some samples of each different species that we would see, and also figured out how many species are in these environments and how is that impacted by environmental stress. And so here what you see is that in urban mediums, which are an intermediate level of stress, because although it's an urban environment, the mediums between certain transportation pathways have a little bit less man-made structure there, and it's a good environment for ants in particular. And so we found that those will have a certain amount of variation in unique species of ants. And as you see, as we go from a more urban development to a more forested, less urban biome, the uniqueness of species and the more speciation that's occurring in those areas increases. The X's at the bottom, what we see are urban, and so the more samples we collect, the less variation of species we're seeing. However, in more forested areas, which we would consider rural as far as man-made structures go, speciation and diversity increases. Where we have areas of greater diversity and more speciation occurring, we have more exotic species compared to the native species that start there. And so the likely origin of the giant ant, which is now terrorizing the area, is from a more forested, perhaps rural area outside of the city where stress is less. And so environmental factors are not impacting the speciation as much, and so it's more free to increase. And so in areas where there's greater speciation and diversity, it's possible that an exotic species such as this one will develop. And so the biggest question is, how do we stop this giant killer ant? What we have determined is that since it comes from rural areas, we need to drive it back into rural areas outside of the urban biome. And from there, we propose...
Ant, come on! Come on! Come on! Alright, drop the boot!
Stop it!